I just think it comes down to, do you want to build yourself a job or do you want to build an actual business? And if you want a job, cool. Keep doing design, keep doing development work.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. Just know what it is you're looking to build. And if you want to build a business, then you've got to put the infrastructure and the process and the people in place that can do the things that you don't want to do. I'll take an owner through an exercise of like, track everything you're doing for an entire week. And then let's go through it and say, and I'm not saying track your time, just like make a list of all the crap you did today and how many times you jumped between a million different things. And then let's go through and say, all right, project manager can be doing these things. A bookkeeper can be doing these things. A designer or a production artist can do these things, but I really love doing this, so I'm going to hold on to it. Cool. Let's make that happen. But I think if you want to focus on a craft and do that craft, you're building yourself a job.
All right. So I am really excited for today's guest, Steve Guberman, a friend of mine that has a tremendous amount of experience in this space and is able to look at things from a bunch of different angles. So Steve started the agency journey over 30 years ago. And during that time, he started out as a graphic designer. He built things up. He ended up exiting. He stayed on and worked for a while. So he's kind of seen the full cycle. After exiting his agency, he started his coaching program, Agency Outside. He also is the host of an agency podcast called Agency Bites. So really excited to have with us today, Steve Guberman. Welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Awesome, Patrick. How are you?
Good, man. Good. I'm thrilled to have you on the call today here. So I'd love to start off with, let's find out who Steve is. If you could give us some context of how you got to where you are and why your experience is relevant for our audience.
Yeah, so I guess I've been in the agency space for probably going on 30 years, showing my age. I started way young, obviously. My first job out of school was in-house at Panasonic, doing brand design and in-house marketing and a whole lot of just pixel-on-demand stuff. And I left there and jumped around to a few small agencies here in New Jersey. And eventually launched my own firm. And I launched it kind of as the accidental entrepreneur. You know, I'm a graphic designer, and then suddenly, hey, here's an opportunity to launch a business. And I was working full-time at an agency, freelancing full-time. And my then wife and I had the chance to move from South Jersey to North Jersey, which not a massive move, but it was the opportunity to like be in the outskirts of New York and get better rates and get better clients. Versus South Jersey is kind of podunk. There at the time, I think maybe the going rate was like 30 or 40 bucks an hour for a freelancer. It was abysmal. So I launched my agency at that time when we moved, and fast forward, I ran it for a decade and grew it up to be pretty profitable, 12 people, number of AOR clients, and ended up selling it. The trajectory of owning it, from owning it and eventually selling it, a lot of lessons learned, a lot of bumps, a lot of resistance to niching. And after selling it, I spent 5 years with the acquiring firm. And for the past 5 years, I've been coaching agency owners on working through their goals and challenges and getting clarity on what their goals are and getting away from copycat goals. The lived experience I have in working in a lot of agencies and seeing what works and what doesn't work and running my own shop and making a lot of mistakes and eventually exiting. We also grew the agency through an acquisition. I acquired somebody else's book of business and went through that experience. So then now, fast forward 5 years of coaching, I've helped over 100 agencies in a zillion different ways. So there's no two agencies that come to me with the same goals or the same challenges. And so a lot of experience there as well.
Yeah, you've kind of seen this from a lot of different angles, from a startup to building it, scaling, acquisitions, exiting, and then now from coaching, which is it's kind of rare to see someone that's gone through the full gambit of all these different things. And I'd love to kind of go back to the initial days, because I know that a lot of the audience out there they're in that scaling phase. I would love to just kind of go deeper. You had mentioned like, hey, there's a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. What are some of the things that you've learned when you were scaling your agency, and how did your kind of mindset shift along the way?
I guess the two biggest things that I learned the hardest ways were, one is delegating and putting smart and talented people in place and then trusting them to do their jobs. I'm a designer by nature, and so that led me to be somewhat of an ego freak and somewhat of a control freak. Those characteristics don't allow for people to do their jobs freely and have autonomous, abilities to execute. And so I became a logjam. I pissed off a lot of my employees, getting up, in their business, move aside, I'll just do it myself kind of nonsense. But owners and leaders' inability to delegate limits their ability to grow, limits their team members' ability to grow. And it's a massively debilitating characteristic. So that's one massive thing I learned about. The other one was fighting, niching our agency. I wanted to never be bored. I wanted to be, all things to all people. I didn't want to ever turn down work. And I worked with an agency coach and was part of a mastermind group of business owners, not just agency owners. And I just felt like, man, I'm going to miss out on too much if we niche down. And my coach at the time convinced me to give it a shot. And I kind of dipped my toe into it and dipped another toe into it. And before long, like we were niched in 4 or 5 verticals, and business kind of just, didn't almost, but pretty well just knocked on our door. And we became experts in these industries. We became seen as the authority in these industries. And it made biz dev, it made marketing, it made process and profitability so much better. And I wish I hadn't, dragged my feet on that for 3 or 4 years. And I wish I had leaned into it sooner. And that's where I'm doubling down on agencies leaning into vertical or service niching, because the days of the generalists are just shot to shit right now. Those are definitely the 2 biggest lessons I learned the hard way.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here with this, and those are 2 lessons that I've kind of like fought myself, right? Let's go back to the first one. So this idea of delegating, I kind of view this as it's a double-edged sword here, where, hey, we're just getting started maybe, or we're along our journey. And if we're going to delegate, we have to be able to trust, but maybe we don't feel like we can hire the A players that are needed that we can actually delegate and trust. And we also don't want to, hey, I've worked hard to put myself in this position. And I don't want to sacrifice quality. But if we don't if we don't release control, we're never going to have freedom, right? It's always going to be, everything's on us. And that's like, leveraging other people's skills and their time and their abilities this is what allows a business to grow. And how did you manage that?
So I think it even starts at a more micro level. Think about somebody launching a business. It's them doing everything, and one person just can't do everything, right? You've got to focus on, where's my time most valuable? So it's probably not most valuable sending out invoices and doing bookkeeping. So outsource that, get a bookkeeper. Like small steps, finding the things that all right, what can somebody else do that doesn't require my skills or experience or ability? Typically over time, the final thing that rests on the owner as they grow is biz dev and sales. Owner-led sales, we've all heard, is just really hard to transfer out. But, I was on a call just 2 days ago with an owner. They love being the lead developer. And so they've transferred all of their other responsibilities to team members, or we live in a great age of VAs, offshore VAs who are able to execute on their behalf. So, they get to do the thing that they love. For me, I launched my agency because I love doing design, and I found myself, a couple years in, not being able to do design. At the very least, I was able to do some top level creative direction. I could jump into Illustrator to mock something up as this is a direction I want you to take things in. But I wasn't doing design. I was leading teams, doing biz dev, running accounts, and CEO level visionary stuff. So in order to make room for those big ticket, big picture items, you've got to get the other stuff off your plate. Even if it's a team of 1 at the agency, or a team of 3 at the agency, or a team of 10, those things still matter to get off your plates to make room for these big picture, big ticket items. You can even break it down to saying what is my time as the CEO worth versus the junior designer's time worth? And, a lot of owners I'll just do it myself. It'll be quicker. No, that's just the worst mantra to ever start repeating to yourself.
Yeah, it's also not true long term, right?
Right.
Where you're
Right.
not the best at whatever it is that you think you are. You may be the best in your company now, but there's somebody out there that's all they do and they love it.
Yeah.
And their time is divided. And it's only a matter of time before they are better than you if they're not already. There's like, unless you're the best in the world, which is really, really hard to be at anything, there's somebody else that's better. So there's this kind of compromise that a lot of people make, and maybe it doesn't have to be true. It's like we start something because we love a piece of this, but as we start the company, we have to do all these other things that we don't necessarily love. And if you kind of combine this idea, I don't know if you've been through Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time, where he talks about the things that light you up and the things that like suck your energy. So for you, what it sounds like lit you up was the actual design, but you were forced into doing this like CEO type responsibilities, which is that's not why we started the company. So how do you kind of like reconcile this where it's like, hey, this was my passion, but now as I've grown, I'm spending all my time doing like CEO type stuff.
I just think it comes down to, do you want to build yourself a job or do you want to build an actual business? And if you want a job, cool. Keep doing design, keep doing development work.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. Just know what it is you're looking to build. And if you want to build a business, then you've got to put the infrastructure and the process and the people in place that can do the things that you don't want to do. I'll take an owner through an exercise of like, track everything you're doing for an entire week. And then let's go through it and say, and I'm not saying track your time, just like make a list of all the crap you did today and how many times you jumped between a million different things. And then let's go through and say, all right, project manager can be doing these things. A bookkeeper can be doing these things. A designer or a production artist can do these things. But I really love doing this. And so I'm going to hold on to it. Cool. Let's make that happen. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying, yeah, to Dan's point, like get rid of the things that light you up. Who wants to be miserable doing stuff they don't love doing?
Right.
But I think if you want to focus on a craft and do that craft, you're building yourself a job. Not a bad thing, but this a far distant picture from what a business is.
100%. If you get everything dialed in your agency or in your business, and then you still on the side decide that you want to do this thing, you have that option. But it's better to have that option than to be forced into it. And I'll tell you, like when I was building LeadSnap, our software, I love coding, but I'll tell you, once we pulled ourselves out of the business, my wife and I, we started to travel around the world. Like I like traveling around the world. I like sitting on the beach and going to see soccer games in Europe more than I like coding. And I could always like plug back into it. So it's like the rules change when you get more options. And if you can pull yourself out of these positions, you can still go do that thing. Or like, what's the thing that you want to do most in the world? If you build a business correctly, you have that option as well. Hey, would you pick design over maybe spending more time with your family? Like,
Yeah.
right. But it's like, you don't have that option until you set the business up the right way. So, yeah, I think that's really good. I think a lot of people kind of have this, I was at this event last week. I was at SEO spring training and I was talking to this lady and she was talking about how she doesn't want to grow and like, cause it's like a lot more stress and she's happy with her life and this type of thing. And I'm like hesitant in these conversations cause I feel like it doesn't have to be that way. Like you can grow and you can grow in a way where you don't like, we're doing bigger numbers than she is, and she's working more than me. Like, so it's like getting the leadership team in there, like you said, and the right systems. And it doesn't mean that like it has to be stressful. And to avoid growth, what you're really avoiding is the temporary stress, which can give you long life freedom and additional revenue and income from having this like leadership team in place. And, you're buying your way out of a job, essentially. Have you experienced that too, Steve?
Absolutely. And I think it is, I don't say short-sighted, but I think there's a missing vision of, uh, I want to stay small because I'm afraid of the work that it's going to take to get bigger, to give me the freedoms that you just described. And I'm not saying growing and being a certain size is a pressure that people need to listen to. They should grow according to what fits their goals and their family's goals and that of their team. But even at 3, 5, 7, 10 people, those systems can be put in place to give the freedoms that they want, getting the owner out of the day-to-day, getting out of owner-led sales and giving them exactly what you're talking about, an asset that they can, either hand down to future generations of their family or sell, giving them the freedom to live a different lifestyle. No, it's not going to be life-changing money, but it's going to be certainly a big change in what they've ever experienced. So whether it's 7 people or 70 people or 200 people, it all comes down to the systems and the people to execute on those systems. It just matters at scale how they want to grow something or not, you
Right.
know? Um,
Absolutely. I agree. And I think like this idea that you're somehow there's more work, honestly, in this, like you said, it's short-sighted. Uh, you're going to end up doing more work if you don't pull yourself out of the business. It's just like, are you going to work smarter or are you going to work harder? Are you going to have this like freedom or are you going to be like always subject to where it's like, I have to do this because otherwise we're going to lose clients. Right. So,
Even that woman you were talking about real quick, like I guarantee you, if I spent a few hours with her, I could find things to get off her plate that would not cost her money, would make her money and give her more freedom. So she's not working a zillion hours more, like she pointed out, than you are.
right.
It's being in the day to day. It's being pulled into stuff that she probably shouldn't be pulled into, and either not having the right people on the team that can execute autonomously, or not trusting them to execute autonomously, so that she has to be pulled in. Like it's simple levers to pull, but most owners are just so mired down in the day to day they don't even like stop, take a step back, and be like, "Man, 60 hours a week just sucks." Nobody
Yeah,
wants to do
absolutely. We're like, a combination of all the different jobs that we're doing. And some of those jobs are like, hey, this is a $10 an hour job that I do 10 hours a week. So you've essentially created $100 of value during that. And then you've got like another maybe 10, that's $15 an hour. So you start to like chip away at this. And to your point, you can replace this. It's really expensive. If you think like, if let's just assume that somebody has the option to do some sort of outreach, and if they were to calculate their hourly rate, that outreach was worth $1,000 an hour, and it's uncapped because it's outreach. Like you could do it pretty much any time, right? So if you're spending part of your time doing $10 an hour activities, and this outreach is worth $1,000 an hour, every hour that you spend on this $10 an hour activity, you're costing yourself $990 an hour. That's the way I look at it with a lot of our students. And I find business owners like you, they're always in that spot. It's like, what is this stuff? Sending out invoices. How much could we hire, especially with the global economy today? Like we could hire somebody from the Philippines and guarantee it for $12 an hour.
and move them into operations or project management or doing outreach or content marketing. Like, yeah, there's so many talented people around the globe for a fraction of what the owner's time is and value of their time is to execute on some of these tasks that they shouldn't be doing.
100%. It's like a really good use of the owner's time is trying to, in my opinion, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is trying to find the people to bring into our company so that they can do the things we don't want to do. That's really working on the business rather than in the business. So we like bring the talent in, get them trained, have the systems in place, pass it off, right? It's just like from a CEO's perspective, unless you have an HR person in place, I think it's one of the best things you can do. It's like locate amazing talent, get them trained, and then never have to do something, never have to think about it again, really.
Yeah. Any of those tasks that they're doing more than 2 or 3 times, build a system for it, put somebody in place and trust them to execute on the system and be hands off.
Right, right.
Yep.
I had a student in our coaching program that was approaching 7 figures, and he passed off the sales. Right, that's amazing. That's like you said, that's a really hard thing to do, and it's a good transition into this next issue you had. But he passed off the sales, and the mistake that he made is he passed it off without the right systems, without the right tracking, and 2 or 3 months later, he started noticing, hey, we're not growing. And okay, where's the numbers? Where's the tracking? What do we have in place with this? So I think as a part of this transition, as a part of passing the torch, like we've got to get the systems in place and kind of like the way that this can go. And what we started doing in our agency, I'd love to hear how you guys coach on this. So we build the system. Then we have training on that. The person goes through the training. We have a call after that where it's like, all right, I'm kind of like, or our operations or whoever is the person responsible for that role. They're asking contextual questions to like, Does this person really understand the concept? Can I trick them up with a question? Because if they really get it, it's gonna be really hard to like get them into a situation. So after they've gone through that phase, like do X on your own, show it to me. And this could be like a dry run. Okay, this isn't exactly right. You're 90% of the way there. Do it again. Okay, you're 98% of the way there. Do it again. You got it this time. It's 100%. Might look at it a couple more times to make sure it stays at 100. And then we've got the tracking in place. Like, what are the benchmarks? Is this person like hitting where they should be? At that point, we can start to pass it off. But we still have monthly check-ins, or I'm sorry, weekly check-ins where it's like, where are you with the benchmarks? Okay, your close rate is too low. The show up rate is lower than it was. What are you doing? What's that follow-up look like? Our sequence is not working right. Do you agree with this methodology? Do you have any tweaks? Is this kind of how something similar that you're doing, Steve?
Yeah, I guess it's different. The nuances are different, but the top level principles are the same. If there's something I want to pass off to somebody else, whether it's a junior person, a mid-level person, or even bringing a senior person in to execute on a thing, build the system, train them up on it, practice through it. I guess the only difference is the more senior that person is, probably the less training and nuances would need to go into it. Other than, again, if the leader is kind of in a control, like, hey, you're not saying the exact words that I would say, or something along those lines, in which case I think that's a whole other issue. But train them up, review it, work through it, maybe partner up on a few calls or a few, pitches, and absolutely put in the systems to track the KPIs or the OKRs or like whatever it is that you're putting, the metrics that you're putting in place of, top of funnel, we've got to get, 100 people a month, and we've got to have 50 calls, and we expect X amount of proposals, and our close rate should be X. And literally building out those metrics and expectations, having, in this case, whether it's a sales system, having a CRM in place, whatever the supportive tools that are required, having those in place and part of the process as well. But yeah, I think that can work for a number of different agency or frankly any business operational elements.
Here's a great thing too. For you guys that are owners that are out there that, hey, we're not ready to hire, build the system as you go. Like you're in the perfect spot to be documenting things, laying out the benchmarks for this, and start to do the math. If you do what Steve said earlier for a week where you're tracking, and then you could work with ChatGPT and be like, hey, if I was going to hire in Colombia, if I was going to hire in Argentina, Philippines, India for this role, what would it cost me? Here's a description of the things that I'm doing. How much would this cost me? And if you have a collection of things that are costing different hourly rates, you can start to calculate your opportunity costs for what it costs to do these low-level things. And then if you have the system in place, now we're into the hiring spot, and it's like, how do we find the best person?
I think a similar practice for that is, all right, if I get 3 hours a day off my plate, what does that free me up to do? How much more business could I win? Or, what are the top level things that I should be executing on that are of greater value for that 3 hours a day? And if, let's say, as an owner, my time is worth $300 an hour. If I can pay somebody $10, $15 an hour, look at the profitability difference on the time spent on these activities. So a lot of people get tripped up on when we talk about systems like we're talking about, and especially if it's a small shop, it doesn't mean it has to be in Notion. Fire up a Google Doc and say, here's how I currently do cold calling. Here's how I currently, add deals into my pipeline. Here's how we build SEO campaigns. Like whatever it is that you do on a repeatable fashion, fire up a Google Doc and just start tracking it. I think what it's called, there's an AI tool that you can put in the browser that will follow your activities and it'll build a system for you. I forget what it's called. I'll have to look it up later, but it doesn't mean it needs to be built out in Asana or Notion or ClickUp or any of these tools. These are the steps that we take to do a thing. That's what we're talking about.
Right. Honestly, the difference between like Google Doc, the difference between not having it in Google Docs and the difference between Google Doc and having like a dedicated system. I think there's one called Scribe that does this where
that's right. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
It documents everything. Like the difference between nothing and Google Docs is massive. The difference between Google Docs and having like this beautiful dialed in SOP system is, I would say, like negligible. Like
Exactly.
If someone can follow it, the difference is huge. If somebody
Yep.
can follow it a little bit better, the difference, like assuming that people aren't dropping the ball, like the difference is pretty small. So like there's like no better time to start if you like just document your own stuff, right? Just you'll get better
Yeah,
at documenting.
especially as a solopreneur, or if you got one person in place, or it's a solopreneur with a team of contractors. This is how we do X at this agency. So that when you start to bring people on, they can reference that and be like, oh, especially if it's a junior person who's barely had any experience doing anything. Well, hey boss, how do I build out, Google Ads campaigns? Cool. Here's a document. Read that first. Then we're going to talk about it.
Right.
It just makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes no sense not to do it, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
well, let's talk about niching down. The second mistake that you made, and you drug your feet through this. I did the same thing. And I would just love to hear this. What was your experience like? It sounds like you niched down into 4 or 5 different things. Like, how did we choose this? And then you had mentioned, which I think is maybe the most important part of this, is like you started to position yourself as the industry expert, which probably led to inbound, which a lot scale with predictability.
So I'll say this to preface. This was, I sold my business 10 years ago. So timing has changed massively. And it's now even more important to be an industry expert because of how AI is referring business providers based on search, whether that AI result is in a Google AI results or in ChatGPT or Claude or any of these other tools. So back back in the day, it was far different, and it was, hey Susan, who'd you use for your banking branding? Oh, we used Acme Co. So it was far different. But what I'll say is, we started to go through our book of business, previous 2 or 3 years, and all the clients that we worked with, and we categorized them based on it's funny, I did a talk on this in Colorado a few weeks ago, and I found my agency whiteboard of when we workshopped all this from like 17, 18 years ago. It was pretty funny. But so we looked at all of our clients. We said, who do we like working with? Who do we get the best results for? Who trusts us to do our jobs? And who's got a volume of business that like we know we can tap into. So we identified, 3, 4, 5 verticals that we could lean into that we had that history with. So it was higher ed, not for profits, financial, but not like consumer financials, like credit unions, and consumer tech. So 4 not adjacent industries.
Right.
That way, if one of those industry happened to tank, we're not out of business. And so we started to lean into messaging that applied to these 4 verticals. Now, we didn't do it overnight. We didn't fire any of our clients because they don't fall into those 4 buckets. If somebody knocked on our door and said, hey, we're not in your 4 verticals, but we're in whatever, automotive, would you work with us? We typically didn't say no, but it gave us the ability to say no. But what it did was gave us the ability to say, in these four verticals, the work that we do is, and we shave down our services from like 20 things to 6 things is about the ideal number of services that an agency should provide. And we found ways to make them profitable by operationalizing our systems. So we lost money for years on almost every website we did because we had prima donna developers that I hired that were very talented who wanted to custom code everything. And that resulted in scope creep on our end and, just dumping tons of time and money into a project we shouldn't have been doing. But over time, we were able to systematize that and use frameworks that we had pre-built, tools that we had pre-built, and get the websites, to be more profitable. Niching into these 4 verticals and saying we do branding and web for these verticals gave us a message that we can hone, gave us the ability to know where to find these people. You go to networking events, you go to LinkedIn groups, you go hang out where the CMOs from consumer tech are, and you get to know them. I did a lot of speaking at the time. We were doing blogging and white papers. So it helped us open up a funnel of inbound leads that we had never had before, while, long-winded answer, while making the work that we were doing more profitable.
Right. You essentially productize your offer so that it was
Yeah.
very repeatable. Like, okay, it's kind of like we go to the restaurant, there's a menu there. And you have options to pick from. You don't just be like,
Right.
okay, cook this with this and this, right? Which is, I think a lot of agency owners fall into that, right?
Well, a lot of
It's
agency owners will say yes to everything because of their scarcity mindset. Like, if I
right,
say yes to this, I lose business. Well, it's probably the wrong business for you anyway.
right, right. A lot of times I think the business owners, what they're after is more business. And there's different agencies that can provide different vehicles on how to get them there. And I think what's important is to get really good at your vehicle and then
Yep.
have the sales process that explains the benefits. And then when that happens, people will align with what you're offering. If you come in there all wishy-washy and you're not kind of the leader on the call and the professional that's directing them towards a solution, and obviously it has to be based on their needs, but like it seems like the people that come to us and we give us like, hey, here's what we do and here's our offer. They're like, that's exactly what we need. It just seems like it happens every time. Part of it is a sales process of being really clear in, make sure you're selling the whole and not the drill, right? Like, what are you looking for? Here's how this can be that, right?
Yeah. I just heard that analogy recently. I don't remember where I heard it, but yeah, don't sell the drill. Don't sell the drill bit. You want to sell the solution, which is, oh, you need a hole.
Right.
Maybe it was Forrest was talking about that, but yeah. Um, the other thing, and you kind of alluded to it, is agencies chase clients and they treat the client like the prize. And when you're niched and you're in a position of strength and again, non-scarcity mindset, you as the agency are the prize and you get to lead the process and you get to dictate the terms and within reason you get to dictate budgeting and things like that. But it's easier to say, yeah, our branding projects start at 30 grand and we do our discovery and we do a paid discovery for 10 grand. And after that discovery, maybe we won't even work with you because we might not like you. And maybe you take the discovery and you go somewhere else. Whereas when you're not niche, you're like, yeah, whatever you need, we'll figure it out. We'll get it done. And how much money do you have? When do you need it by? Right. So there's two very different positionings in that biz dev relationship building process. The trust is established because you're an expert in consumer tech branding or B2B SaaS branding. And I already trust you because I see the track record you have versus prove to me that you can do this work. Like you're already starting at a deficit.
Right. Yeah. Completely different conversation when the positioning is dialed in is like, we're not the commodity here, right?
Yeah.
Like we're the experts, and not in like a jerk way of saying it, but like you're fortunate to be having this conversation with us, right? Like we're the ringer here. You've cut like we have the ability to have a massive impact on your business versus like, please work with me. This is like we'll do a great
Yep.
job, right?
You came to us for a reason. We're going to guide you through our brand development process, which is, tried and true with, these other 37 consumer tech brands, right? So you came to us for a reason. Like that's how that conversation should
Right.
really go.
Yeah, I like it. That positioning is fantastic. So we've got a few minutes left here, and I would love to. We talked briefly before the show about the 6 Ps, and
Yep.
I'd love to just kind of get an overview of what that is and why that is so important. One of the questions that led to this, I was like, hey, what do you think some of the biggest mistakes that agency owners make? And you said, well, this is a part of it. But from the top, if you can just walk us through that.
So in my experience, and this is not written in stone anywhere, but what I found is that almost all challenges that an agency owner faces falls into one or all of these. And I love alliteration, so I just narrowed it, banged them down into a P word. So it's pipeline, positioning, process, profit, people, and then my favorite is personal balance with the business. So and I'll go in reverse order. My biggest challenge that I found was 2 to 3 years in running my agency. I was working 60 hours a week. When and if I could remember to pay myself, I was making minimum wage. And 60 hours was like a minimum, right? And I would take any business that knocked on my door. So there was no balance whatsoever with the business. And I want to help agency owners build more time into their life, pay themselves first, build the profit stream of the business so they can pay themselves, what they deserve as an owner. They're putting all the risk on the line. So why are they not paying themselves? You ask an owner, what's your, is your business profitable? Well, yeah, we're at, 8% profit this year, but I haven't paid myself. I'm like, well, then no, you're not profitable at all. You know,
Salary.
yeah. So they don't understand the numbers. People, it's all about putting people in place that are in the right seats for the right reasons, that you trust and that you can delegate to, that can execute for you. Making sure that you've got the right procedures in place for them to follow, that you're building culture around, the team that you're building. And that can happen if you're remote or in person, and if they're contractors or employees. Profit is, are you charging the right amount? And, are your deliveries optimized so that you're not losing money on all the projects that you're doing? You're not over servicing accounts. Profit is more than just top line or bottom line, what's left over at the end of the month. It's far more than just that, but knowing your numbers and knowing how long it takes to execute on something. Process leads to the ability to get something done efficiently. We talked about writing it down in a Google Doc or using Notion or something like that, reviewing that on a regular basis, having somebody who's got ownership of that, all the process within the agency, client onboarding, client offboarding, hiring employees. It can just be a Google Doc, like we said, but it can also be something far more sophisticated, videos, etc., whatever. Positioning leads to, it's what we talk about with the niching. Instead of saying we are all things for all people, it's, we provide X for X, and building that so that it opens up the floodgates for a more narrow top of funnel as opposed to a wider voluminous top of funnel. And then the pipeline is really, how much work do you have ahead of you? Do you have inbound leads? Do you have the ability to price them accordingly so that they are profitable and your process is supporting that? Are you strategically asking for referrals, going out and getting new business, doing all the things that are going to feed into this pipeline? So those are the 6 things that I found over the years really are, comprehensive of most of the challenge that agency owners face.
Yeah, I love this. I love this. A lot, if not all, are tied together, right? The positioning is going to
Absolutely.
impact our pipeline. Our processes are going to impact our profitability, right? All of these things, like we have to have the people to have the processes, right? We can't really have the people if we don't have documented processes because they're not going to know what to do. So I love this framework. It seems very like, hey, we can lay it out as the 6 Ps. It's comprehensive, but it's also it's also simple, but there's a lot to this. There's a lot to get those letters lined up for us.
Yeah.
Right. So I think having something like this that people can follow and be like, hey, these are the 6 Ps. It kind of gives you a checklist in your agency. And I think you can have the 6 Ps when you're at 30K. And then when you get to 90K a month, like those are going to be broken. You're going to have to rebuild these. So they're going to have to evolve over time.
Yeah, they're living, breathing things. They're not, oh, I got this, check, one and done. It's an ongoing evaluation. These are the things that when I do a discovery with an agency, I deliver an agency profile and I give a baseline of, between red, yellow, orange, green, or red, orange, yellow, green of, here's where I see from the outside your agency ranks on these 6 Ps. And
Right.
it's a baseline of let's do the work now to get everything in the green. And we'll review it, 6 months, 9 months, a year down the road, etc. I don't think anybody's ever always stayed in the green. We get things to the green, but then, like you said, great, we're at a new level. We've got new people. Things are starting to break. So we're dropping back down into the orange. What do we need to adjust? What do we need to review? That's why I said somebody's got to own this process or process of processes to say, like, hey, we've got more people in here. Is it working the way it used to when it was just you and me or, 3 of us? So
Right.
it's a living, breathing thing.
Yeah. So you're kind of like, you could approach this where we evaluate this quarterly and then we say, okay, what do we need the most? Like what is hurting us the most right now? Let's build our quarterly projects or rocks and attack those things. Then we reevaluate what's changed. Where are we now? Right? How do we keep moving this forward? I love this framework. It's kind of like, we run EOS in our company and we have our quarterly planning and there's different departments, right? So marketing, you have these rocks, operations, hiring, we need to bring on this person or replace this person, right? So that gets planned out and kind of going through that prioritization. So we always know, I think a lot of people, they put their head down and they just go and they never stop and like pull themselves out of the chessboard and be like, hey, am I doing things in the right order? Am I doing the stuff that matters most? It's one of the most important things, in my opinion, running a business. Are we doing things in the right sequence? Are we focused on the right thing? If you focus on the right thing, you can go way faster. And if you do the wrong thing, 60% of the time, something that's like maybe like beneficial 20%, and then there's like 20% where it's like, hey, we're doing the perfect thing. What does it look like if you just spent all your time doing the thing that matters most?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think whether it's the CEO setting the vision for these are the order of priorities, or each departmental head is saying, here's what our priorities are, getting, kind of the sign off from the CEO on their vision. EOS, I think, is a magical tool. I discovered that, I don't know, 5-7 years ago. So no matter how big or small an agency is, I highly recommend reading Traction. Or there's even a book called, an audiobook. It's like a 1 hour listen. It's What the Heck is EOS? And you can pull gems from that on, like, here's how I can like really better run my meetings, or, there's just a lot of gems in there. So yeah, highly recommend that. But yeah, these are things that, over time, again, it's constantly evolving, personal balance for an owner is like, if you're at 2 people and you can like build it so you can work 4 days a week, great. Can you still do that at 10 people? Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you can work 3 days a week. Like, so everything has got to be shifting.
Right. Yeah. The personal balance. I love that that's a P. It seems like that one is easy for people to forget because we want to sacrifice that one for the other five. I've got a performance coach that I work with on the kind of the mental side of things. And she's given me this sort of internal mantra where it's like, we can only perform to the degree that we recover, and you're going to like pay for it one way or another. You're going to be unhappy. Eventually you're not going to be performing well. You're not going to be focused, zoned in. Like your team will feel it. You're not giving that time up by taking a break to care for yourself. You're gonna pay for it one way or another, right? And even some people are gonna pay for it with like health issues later on, right? So yeah, I love that that's a P, and that should be a priority from the beginning. The future isn't guaranteed. And if we always delay like for the future, maybe that never comes. But if you build it in from the beginning, it's there the whole time. And it's, as we say, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So like include that as a part of your journey. I think that's amazing advice. Steve, this has been fantastic. And I want to give people away 2 questions for you that are left. One is like, how can people reach you, and any final thoughts that you'd like to share before we hop off?
So 2 ways. One is, LinkedIn. My handle is agency coach. So that's pretty easy. But also have a podcast for agency owners also. Hopefully it's super helpful. So it's just called Agency Bites. And then just final thoughts is, and you kind of led to it, man, is like the future is probably whatever, it's never coming. And so what can you execute on today that's going to give you a little bit of movement for yourself, for your team, for your clients, for your family, first and foremost? What can you delegate? What can you get off your plate? What things can you put into place, and take a chance and say, I'm just going to leave the email there, or I'm going to let somebody else do it, or I'm going to delegate it and trust that they're going to do it. Like, stop controlling, stop, needling in everything, delegate and get it off your plate.
I love it. I love it. It's fantastic, man. Thank you so much for being here. Great advice. Awesome session. Just really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the $1 Million Agency Podcast.
I appreciate you joining me. I love the energy and what you're building and what you have built. And so happy to be a part of it, and appreciate your time.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks, brother.